Before we get talking about the tools that I'd like you to download and install on your computer, I'd like to discuss just a couple more things about XHTML and CSS. And that is, the reason we're working with these tools is, first off, HTML is hypertext markup language, and it is how web pages have always been marked up, whether there's a hyperlink or whether something's bold or something italicized, or whether something's a header or not. That's always the way it's been. CSS came along later, and like I said, in the last video, it's used to do all visual placement and visual standards. So you've got this particular font, and this thing is placed here, and this is placed there. That's all through CSS. But it wasn't that way originally. We used to use tables, and tables were never designed for visual placement, but that's what we did as designers way in the beginning, because CSS just really hadn't evolved enough to do all the things that it can do now. And the benefit of doing things the way we do now with all of the visual stuff in a CSS file is that search engines, for one, can understand what your content is about a lot easier, because the search engine comes to your site and it reads the code, and now it doesn't have to sift through all the visual stuff. Font color this, oh here's a table cell, oh here's an image being called in directly, though you will call in some images directly normally. Most of them are in the CSS. So it gets down to the content for that. For accessibility purposes, screen readers, people who can't see very well, people who may not want to see the visual side, they just want the text, that is now something they can do, and the web page will still make sense, because if something is marked up properly in HTML, XHTML, or HTML5, it will flow like here. It'll make sense. Hold on a second. It'll make sense to the reader without any of that stuff. Okay, so that's up to you to code things in the proper semantic order. Okay, beyond that, we are hoping that through properly coded sites, that from browser to browser you get a more consistent visual experience than newer browsers. And ideally, as you get more experience as a front-end developer for web, you will learn to make your web pages do what's called degrading gracefully, meaning that, okay, maybe not all the features show up in IE8 that show up in IE9, but the web page is very passable. And so you start to learn how to do that type of thing as things go on. And by using CSS, that's something far more doable than it used to be. You used to see a lot more of this website is best viewed in IE, whatever it might have been. And that's because there were some options for setting up a site to behave better in this browser or that browser, but they were clunky at best, and now things are tremendously better. So we're working on standardizing how things are coded. So we get things, things are created in a universal, coded in a universal manner, so we get more consistent performance, and we want things to be as easily accessible as possible for anyone. So when you get really advanced with your development, the browser, you can set things up so that your web page, the fonts can be increased or decreased, and your web page is still viewable. So screen readers can come along and read that back-end code, and it'll all make sense. Ideally, even your design is set up so somebody who has problems with color blindness and contrast can even experience it. Now for some that might mean they just have to disable the CSS, but it'd be really great if your design didn't need all of that. And so as you get further along in your web development career, you'll start to consider those things more and more and become more adept at implementing them. So with that, I know I said it in the last video, but the next video we'll talk about some of the tools that you can download to your computer.